Hello, my name is Joel C. Williams, and I'm the Director of Products for Peaceful Operations. Good works everywhere. Today, the purpose of this lecture, what I want to talk about, is a phenomenon that I see happening in small claims courts across the country. A lot of plaintiffs with really good cases are getting their cases dismissed for some really trivial reasons. And what I'm going to try to do today is give you 5 tips that I hope will give you some knowledge, something that you can look at, maybe something you hadn't even considered, and will help you to make a decision on whether or not you should seek legal counsel to help you make some of these decisions with regards to your bedbug lawsuit. Now, the first thing I want to say is a disclaimer. The purpose of this lecture is for purely educational purposes, and it should not be construed as specific legal advice. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about one of the phenomena that happens when a plaintiff in a small claims court bedbug lawsuit, when they bring their case to court. One of the first things that they encounter is that they simply were not prepared for the questions that they're going to be asked, or even the procedure. And one of the reasons, I think, for this, the big misunderstanding, is something known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, let's talk about that really quickly. The Dunning-Kruger effect, it's a fancy term, but it's a very simple concept. It's a psychological concept developed by 2 psychologists from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, back in 1999. What had happened was, a year prior to that, there was a bank robber. I think his name was MacArthur Wallace, I think was his name. But this guy is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, walks into 2 banks and tries to rob them, and with no mask or anything, and they air his face, the likeness from the security camera. They air it on the regional TV that night. He's picked up by midnight. Okay, when the police are questioning him, they arrest him and they question him. He can't believe that he has been caught. In fact, he's saying, but I wore the juice. I wore the juice. How did they see me? How did they get that? This is a classic example of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, what had happened was this guy put lemon juice on his face, and he believed, erroneously, that this would conceal his identity. Now, you wonder, most people would look at that and go, well, that's just ridiculous. That's crazy. Why would he even think that that would work? But it actually has some basis in science. So going back to Roman times, the use of lemon juice with, I think you mix a little bit of soap, maybe some water. You can take a feather, basically a quill, you can dip it in that concoction and write on paper. And when it dries, it will be invisible to the naked eye until that piece of paper is held over a candle or some other heat source, and then you can clearly see the writing. And George Washington did this during the Revolutionary War with the Culpeper spy ring. So this is a well-known espionage tactic. This has been widely discussed. It's in literature everywhere, and more importantly, it actually works. So it's based in some reality. Now, what his problem is he was way overconfident in his skill. He had way much more confidence in his skill than his actual ability. And that is what has been come to known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. For example, you might watch somebody playing golf on TV, and it looks very simple to take a golf club and hit the ball and basically follow it over and knock it into a smaller hole. Very simple concept, and in fact you might be very good. You might go do it and be very good around your peers, the people you know. You might be excellent, you might be the best in your group. But when you go from that next level, from novice to apprentice, or I should say novice to amateur to expert to master, there are varying degrees of difficulty, and they get harder for each degree. So it's for example, it's very easy to go from swinging the club and getting good distance and being fairly good at golf, but the gap between being an amateur and being a master, where you're able to play golf at the level of Tiger Woods, for example, there's a huge gap. And the problem is most people who have no experience with something overestimate their abilities to do it. So that person who watches golf on television can erroneously believe, oh, well, that looks very easy. I can be just as good as Tiger Woods if I give it a little practice. And I think that's what's happening in a lot of these bedbug lawsuits, is there's a lot of these 30-minute court shows, Judge Judy, Joe Brown. There's these 30-minute shows that are on daytime TV, and people watch this and they think, oh, well, I can do that. I can go into court and bring my paperwork, and I should have no problem doing this. This is a very easy thing for me to do. But the reality is, once you get into that level, the gap between your knowledge and your skill becomes very, very apparent very readily. And so what I want to do is talk about 5 things that you may not have considered, so that you maybe will reconsider how you bring about your bedbug claim. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is judges. Okay. One thing that's important to know is that in America, it is illegal to bribe a judge. You cannot openly give a judge money to try to influence their decision. But it is allowed to contribute to their political campaigns. Every judge, most judges that sit in these small claims courts across America are elected officials. So they have to run campaigns. They have to be elected to that position. One of the things that you might experience, especially if you live in a large city, is that many of these property owners that own, let's just say 3 apartment complexes, maybe some rental storage properties, it is in their best interest to go ahead and pay $20,000, $30,000 to the judge's election campaigns. It doesn't necessarily mean that the judge will find in their favor, but it certainly gives them an advantage that you may not have. A lot of people don't know that. And there's even a dirty little secret in the legal profession. There's a saying, it's a good attorney that knows the law, but it's a great attorney that knows the judge. And those personal relationships that develop in the court, because these property owners, again, if you're in the business of renting property, sooner or later you're going to have to evict someone. Sooner or later you're going to be in court on a contract dispute. And the familiarity with those judges, you're going to see them all the time. They're going to see your landlord all the time, or their attorneys all the time. They're going to be familiar with them. When you come into court, you don't have that same advantage. And I think you should be aware of that. Now, the second thing I want you to know is bedbugs are a relatively recent phenomenon. And when I say that, I'm talking generally. But after World War II, in 1945, when the Americans came back, the troops came back home, we had discovered DDT, which is a very, very powerful pesticide. It's a very powerful toxin. And in fact, it's so powerful, we used it for everything in the military. We would spray barracks in the tropical regions. We'd use it to kill mosquitoes. It was very, very effective. Now, the problem with DDT is that it was highly toxic and it would persist within the food chain. So, for example, a insect like a mosquito would be sprayed with DDT, and then a small bird would eat that mosquito, passing the toxins onto that bird, and then a larger bird would eat that small bird, and the toxins would pass on to that bird. And what was happening is the eggs from those birds, the wall of the egg was too thin to be viable. That was one of the side effects of DDT. So we go from the 1950s to the 1960s, where DDT had all but eradicated bed bugs throughout the world, and especially in the United States. We almost got rid of them all. And then in the 1970s, when the Environmental Protection Agency was formed, one of the first things that they did was ban DDT. At the same time, the American bald eagle was placed on the endangered species list, and it was found that DDT was weakening the eggshells of those birds, and boom, the EPA banned the use of all the use of DDT throughout the country. So what happened as a consequence of that is we started to see a small uptick of bed bugs coming back into America, but never on the scale as we have now. What happened, fast forward, to the 2008 Summer Games in China, in Beijing, and you had world travelers coming from all over the world, staying at motels and hotels in Beijing. And entomologists, people who study bugs, now know that there's certain species of bed bugs that had been found only in North Africa and parts of the Middle East, were now dispersed throughout the world. When those international travelers came to Beijing, and they stayed a couple weeks for the Summer Games, those bed bugs hitchhiked back home with them in their luggage. So we saw, after 2008, we saw a massive increase of the cases of bed bugs here in the United States, and indeed throughout the world. But the reason I'm telling you that is because it's a relatively, the new explosion of bed bugs, this recent occurrence since 2008, really caught a lot of judges off guard. They had never seen it before. So the chances are the judge that's presiding over your case came of age in an era where DDT was super effective and had killed off more bed bugs. So the chances are that the judges that you encounter probably have not had real world experience dealing with bed bugs. And that's important for you to know, because a lot of those judges will see or hear about bed bugs and think, oh, well, it's just like fleas, it's just like mosquitoes. It's a nuisance, but it's not something that would render a dwelling uninhabitable. And you need to know that, because you're going to be swimming upstream trying to convince these judges of how bad bed bugs are and how it's preventing you from getting sleep and going to work. So knowing that, you can prepare your case a little better. Now, the third thing I think I want to tell people is I'm seeing this is starting to happen more frequently, but landlords are doing this thing where I call a preemptive inspection. And what they're doing is they're hiring a pest management professional or a pest control person, we call them PMPs, pest management professional, to come out to the apartment and say the apartment is vacant, and they come out and they want to certify that there's no presence of bed bugs in this apartment before they rent it. And what will happen is they'll usually come out with a flashlight and a magnifying glass, and they'll look around the baseboards, and you know, they'll spend some time looking, probably about 30-45 minutes, and then they will sign a certificate that says, you know, on such and such a date, I licensed it within the state of such and such, was here at this dwelling, and I did not find the presence of bed bugs. And they'll have that certificate notarized, and it's an official looking document. And one thing you should know is judges love official looking documents. They love them. And the landlords know this, so they go out and get the most official looking document. I've even seen one with a gold seal on the bottom, and it was right next to the notary's signature. It's a very fancy document. But judges love it, and landlords love it too, because they know the persistence of the bedbug egg. And if you're not aware, when the size of an egg is about the length of the tip of a lead pencil, and about that diameter too. And when they're grayish white in color, and when the female lays them, they have a sticky outer coating, an enzyme that dries over time. But the stickiness of that egg allows the female to, she can lay them vertically on the wall, behind light sockets, baseboards, door jambs. There are a lot of places where that female can lay that egg, and it can remain viable for up to 6 months. That egg can erupt 6 months later and you know, create a new infestation. So it's not realistic that some person with a flashlight and a magnifying glass in 30 minutes is going to be able to absolutely verify that there's no bed bugs in this apartment, and it's never going to become a problem. But it certainly looks good when that landlord walks in the court, and it's about proving causality. It's like, who brought the bed bugs here? You know, the plaintiff is going to argue, I moved in and I got bed bugs within 2 weeks. The landlord is going to counter and say, Your Honor, I had a professional pest control operator come out and they searched and they didn't find them. That is just going to torpedo your case if you're not prepared for that. Now that you know that, let me tell you something that you can do to prepare. Okay, every jurisdiction in the country has some agency, some organization that is tasked with ensuring the health and safety of housing. So that could be the health department, it could be a state licensing board that issues certificate of habitability for landlords. Whatever that agency is, they are an agency, they're a bureaucracy. And one thing you should know about bureaucracies is they all keep records. And so if you get an infestation of bed bugs, you should reach out to your local health department. And first, you want to report it. You want to say, hey, I have bed bugs. And once you get that on record, now you have a legitimate document to confirm that. Also, you want to ask them, hey, has there been any previous complaints at this location? It may not be your specific apartment, could be the same building, but it's something that you can walk into court with an official document, and it is a shield, it's armor against the landlord that's able to bring his own document. So I want you to think about that, is getting the documentation to prove up your claim. And it's not that hard. These agencies are taxpayer funded, and so they have to provide the public with documents in a reasonable time. So be sure to reach out and, first of all, you want to report it to them, and then you want to reach out and say, hey, listen, is there a history? Let me know. Give me some documentation. That's something that I think most people don't explore. Now, the fifth, and I think this should go without saying, but I feel like I have to say it, is never lie to a judge, ever. I've seen people who get their case dismissed because they don't want to admit bad facts. The fact of the matter, every case has some bad facts. For example, a lot of times people will rent furniture from these rent-to-own places, Aaron's, and I don't know the other names, but there's these places where you can pay, I don't know, $15 a month, and they'll bring a couch to your place, or TV or something like that. And one of the tactics that the landlord's attorneys will use is they will say, Your Honor, we can't be assured that this person didn't bring those bed bugs in with them because they had some rental furniture. A lot of times the judge will look at you and go, is this true? Did you use a rent-to-own furniture place? Don't lie about it. Tell the truth. Let the chips fall where they may. Okay? Another thing, if you have reclaimed furniture, I've seen this happen. I saw a case in Phoenix, in Maricopa County, get dismissed because somebody lied. One of the things that was happening was a large apartment complex, and people would throw out their mattresses or their couches once they got infested with bed bugs. The management had a policy. Their maintenance people would go around and photograph all of the furniture that was thrown out. And the reason they did that, because they knew a lot of people would reclaim that. They would go out to the dumpster and get that furniture and bring it back into their house. And then boom, 2 weeks later, they'd be complaining about bed bugs. And then the landlord would be able to produce a photo and go, yeah, you reclaimed that. This lady, I remember the specific case, she lied. The judge said, did you reclaim any how did you, he ran through a list of scenarios, and she's answered no to every one. And then when the defendant produced the picture of the furniture, it had a stain, and it was the same couch. There was no denying it. Case dismissed. In fact, I think he ordered her to pay for the court costs and attorney's fees too. So keep that in mind. Don't lie. Don't lie. And if you get legal counsel to represent you, there are ways to prevent bad facts from coming out. They can, motion to suppress that evidence, and there's other things that they can do. So don't lie. That is a sure way to just get your case dismissed. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is, this operation. What I've been doing here, I've been taking C-Mexa and plastic and coaching up people wherever I go, and I give it away for free. I don't charge any money for advising people. But we're running low on C-Mexa and plastic. We need a lot more funding. And I would ask that if you've gotten anything from my videos, if you've helped you out in some way, please think about donating $5, $10, $15, $20. I have a website with a PayPal donation page, and I want you to know all of that money gets, I buy other products and I go out and help people. That's what I do with it. But I need some help. If you guys could find a way to shoot a few dollars to the fund. I think I got everything in there that I wanted to say. Remember, you can always pick up the phone and speak to an attorney about your bed bug case. You know, a lot of them will offer you 30 minutes free consultation. It may be wise to, even if they charge $100, $150, it may be prudent to go ahead and spend that money to have them review the facts of your case and give you some advice, because oftentimes they know the very pitfalls of things that you might encounter. In fact, you may not even know the question that you need to ask, and they can provide you with that information. So consider that. In closing, my name is Joel Z. Williams. You will recognize me by my white hat, but you will know me by my good deeds. Thank you very much.